Thank you all for coming to this. Well, first, I want to thank Linda for putting this together and doing all the hard work. And again, for Troy Webb for allowing us to stay here and putting this together for us. And the GDG group is, so we're hosting the event here as well. And yeah, so we want to just come together and actually celebrate International Women's Day. I know it was marked March 8th, and it's actually been going on for over a century, which is pretty amazing. And it's celebrated all throughout the globe. So we have pretty good backing from Google and the GDG to allow us to put on events like this. So whenever we get sponsorship, we want to give back to the community and have events here for everybody to come enjoy and put together days like this. What else did I say? Do you want to go over the actual introductions? Everybody now?
We have only one minute. Hello, everybody. Thank you for coming here to celebrate International Women's Day. I'm very happy to have you around. That helps. And I would like to thank also our Google developer group founding organizer Jason. He helped us tremendously in putting up this event. Unfortunately, today he cannot be here with us. And I want to thank him, and most of what you see here was even his effort put in making this event. We have a short presentation for Blain. He is a Google Developer Group co-organizer. This is the only one thing I could find on internet about him. Everybody. And so next in the list, we have our first speaker, Amanda Kirk. She's a game designer, educator, and lifelong fan of games. Amanda has been designing games for a variety of audience for over 10 years. She currently serves as the coordinator of RPI's Digital Game Hub by day, working with the local industry and schools to improve game development in the region. In her off time, she works on her own personal projects, does freelancing, and has presented on a wide variety of game development topics, including inclusivity in game development, open source game development, project management, and game design. So let's welcome Amanda Kirk.
Hi, so I'm Amanda Kirk. I'm the Digital Game Hub coordinator up at RPI, and I've been making games for about 10 years now. I wanted to talk a bit about barriers to balance in the tech industry, and specifically to me, the game industry. The game industry is a very unique field where we kind of transcend between technology and creativity, and unfortunately, we have a huge gender imbalance in our industry. I would say right now we have 20% of the total number of people in the game industry are women, and that includes it's across disciplines, so artists and writers, and out of the whole pool of those folks, only 20% are women, and that has been the same way for about 10 years. And we have been trying to change it, but unfortunately, we're still working very hard. So I have spent a number of time working with both students and young women who enter the game industry to work with them to figure out, how to keep them. Because I've been here, and I would like to have more folks that are that have different ideas as to how to make games and have different voices shared. I think this is true not just for women, but other minorities. Having more people in any field allows for a greater expression of ideas and more innovation, which is really important in our industry. So what I found is that often people just have issues with confidence, and this is kind of, I'm sure people have heard about imposter syndrome, the idea that you have only gotten to where you are by some chance or by luck or by secretly convincing people that you're smart when you're not. And it's like, so you can understand on a base level that that is something that you should be mindful of, and maybe you feel that way sometimes. And you, okay, well, I'm going to fix that. But what really is a challenge is that there's more layers to it than that. So a lot of times, in reality, you think that to be able to be a really good programmer, a really good game developer, you need to know everything there is about game development. And it turns out that's not how it actually works in real life. You have a team of 10 or 12 different people. Maybe there's one person who's really good at one aspect or another. But when you're just starting out, that's something that can kind of be something you don't recognize and accept. So a lot of times when you're starting out, especially if you're transitioning from like a software development pipeline into a game pipeline, there might be terms, or it doesn't matter what field it is you're transitioning to. There may be just simple terms that everyone else accepts as rote, and you don't. And I think in general, women who have confidence issues are going to stumble, and they're not going to look, they're not going to ask, because they're afraid that they're going to be, oh, I'm dumb, or people are not going to take me seriously. There's also a false belief that programming always requires advanced math skills. A lot of times, especially in the game industry, we try to champion the rock star programmers, which are the programmers that know like really high level math. They do a lot of the systems development. They do a lot of like the really hard stuff. And they're wonderful people, and they do really great work. But the thing is that you only need some of those. There are other things like UI programming, game mechanic programming. There's a lot of different things that you can use programming skills for that don't necessarily require you to have a high math background. You just have to be able to be, logical with thinking and that kind of thing. The other part of it is that learning new things is actually hard. I think a lot of times people who try to change careers or are trying to learn something for the first time, they struggle. I've worked with people who don't know, like educators a lot of times. They want to learn, what is Minecraft? What is Fortnite? And why won't the kids shut up about it? But, sorry. So it's like, how can you take that information that they have and convert that into something where the students can be productive? And so a lot of times teachers are like, I want to learn about game development. I want to teach kids how they can make games, but they're scared because it's something that they've never done before. And they're thinking, oh, I'm, an adult and I'm not going to learn this thing. It's scary. So there's a lot of discomfort in asking for help and advice. I think a lot of times once you get to a specific level, you can kind of talk amongst your peers. But if you don't have a peer group yet, how do you know when you get stuck? What do you do? I was able to help with a diversity incubator that Tech Valley GameSpace ran last year. And a lot of times the people who are having issues, it was a simple code issue that if you know how to look it up or you know who to ask, simple, easy, we fix it. But a lot of times they think that they're dumb, that they're stuck because they'll never figure it out. And it's like, no, we'll get through this together. There's also a false expectation of task length and difficulty. It's easy for someone who isn't technically oriented to say, this should take you about a week, right? But it turns out that a lot of times these things take longer than you would imagine. And it might be hard to communicate that to people who are assuming that, because you assume that you must be dumb because you can't do it in a week, when it turns out no one would be able to do it in a week. There's also a huge fear of failure, because if you make a mistake, then everyone thinks you're dumb, and here we are. So I think what I really wanted to pull this towards is the idea of a core game loop, where if you look at this Mario level, you're playing, you're having a great time, you fall into that first pit, oops, well, you're not dead, so that's okay. So you can practice, and everything's going fine, and you jump on the next one. And okay, so if you haven't figured out how to get past the first one, and you just, fell in the hole and jumped out again, and you go into the second one and you don't manage to make that, what happens, right? The Mario will fall down, he'll be like, oh no, and then you start again, and that's it. And that's exactly what makes games engaging and fun, and why people play them, especially if you look at really hard games like Sekiro is the game that everyone's playing right now. It's about being able to be in an ecosystem where you are comfortable with failure and you can learn from those challenges, and that is what allows you to innovate. So if people can be in work environments where this is the kind of culture that is encouraged, they're able to succeed, and especially people who would normally be afraid of failing would be able to succeed. So I wanted to do a quick demonstration. This is a 15-minute presentation. I was going to do live coding like Blain did that one time, but then I said, don't do that. So I wanted to show that anyone can program. So I'm just going to go through a few short steps of how to use RenPy, which is a visual novel engine. It's built in Python, which is a fairly good, easy to learn language. I actually never learned it professionally, but I've picked it up using this and other little tools. And a bunch of art assets that I got off of opengameart.org, which is an open source resource for game art. So when I work with high school students, typically we'll send them here if they don't have very good art skills. So here it is, you get started. So you would download RenPy, which is open source, and you can look up RenPy, and there you go. And you would have this lovely interface, which is super easy to use on the left. And I have made a project called 15-Minute Project, because this is supposed to be taking 15 minutes. And then I went and got my art off of OpenGameArt, and you can get to that folder just by clicking on images, and it'll open up. And then to begin your work, you would start on script.renpy, which brings you into this lovely user interface. This is Atom. You can use whatever interface you like. And it starts already stubbed out with everything you would need to know to get started. And if you had pressed play in this screen, you had hit launch project, it would bring you through a tutorial, which has this thing on the left. And then in my case here, I'm like, okay, well, I'm going to create these characters. Eileen, Claire, Lizzie. I'm going to have 4 backgrounds that I have saved out, bar, green room. And I'm going to have characters, and they're going to have different poses. And I can quickly learn how to do this either by having someone who's done it before show me, or you can use the website. And you can see here, we use this with middle school and high school. You can kind of understand, like, this is actually programming. We've tricked a lot of artists into learning how to program using this, because this is actual programming. And then, so I start, and oops, turns out my art that I stole, well, I didn't steal it, it's open source, that I got off of the internet is too large for my screen. So if I was a normal human being, I would just scale it down, because that's how you should fix this problem. But the thing is about programming is there's tons of different ways to fix this problem. So I have decided that instead I'm going to scale it using they have a zoom tool. You can just, so I Googled, and found the forums for the thing, and it's like, okay, this is how you scale it. So then all of a sudden, here we go. So we have a game. It has whatever text I want. You can add variables and choices so that you can have a little narrative game, and then quickly you could make anything. You could do this. Anyone can do this. So I just would like people to keep in mind, thank you, that if you're talking to people who are uncertain, don't know what to do, or have an interest in games, that there's definitely viable paths to get them more confident in making cool things. Thank you.
Okay. So our next speaker is Stacey Gammon. She's worked with the National Security Agency, with Google, and most recently she's a tech lead and principal software engineer at Elastic. Let's welcome Stacey.
So similar topic to Amanda. It's obviously a very relevant topic. And when I was thinking about, thank you, what I wanted to speak to you all about today, what first came to my mind was imposter syndrome. It's something that I've experienced before in my career, and something that I've been surprised to find so many of my peers also experience through different conversations with them, people that outwardly are very successful and smart, also experience imposter syndrome. But as I was going through my own personal experiences with imposter syndrome, I realized that many of them were actually just a lack of confidence, also similar to your speech. Imposter syndrome implies that you've reached some level of success of which to feel unworthy of. But many of my personal situations were just simply a lack of confidence, and having a lack of confidence can make it difficult to achieve success. One of the personal situations that I thought about was when I first applied to work at Google. This was many years ago. And I don't know. Did we play? Okay, we can get back there. So I applied for Google, and I opened up the browser, I uploaded my resume, and I started filling out this questionnaire that they had at the end. And I got to this part where it asked me to list all the publications I've authored. And I felt really foolish. I have never written any books. I've never written any articles. There was like space for like 5 entries. And I closed out of the browser. I was like, I'm being silly. Like, these are the people who apply and get jobs at Google, not me. Now, luckily, my application went through just by uploading my resume. And that was the start of an 8-year career at Google. And I nearly didn't get to experience that because of the doubt that I felt. So reach for opportunities and believe in yourself, because these opportunities may be more attainable than you actually think. So let's say you take my advice and you're reaching for more opportunities. Now you might experience yourself in many interview processes. And confidence can also come into play in the interview process. Interviewing is subjective, at least to some degree. If you're in an interview and you are appearing timid and unsure of yourself, and I'm the interviewer, I'm going to start to feel unsure of you. I might go back and write my feedback that says, well, the candidate answered all the questions, but I don't know, they didn't really seem to know what they were talking about. I'm not so sure. On the other side of the spectrum, the candidate might do great and be confident, and I might go back and fill out my feedback that says something like, well, the candidate didn't quite answer all of my questions, but they really seemed to know what they were talking about. I might be able to learn something from this person. I have got a good feeling about them. Maybe we should hire them. So, my personal story. Now, one of the interviews I went through at Elastic was this JavaScript technical interview, and my background was actually mostly in C++. I had some JavaScript, but it wasn't my forte, and there were a lot of the terms that I didn't actually know. But I tried to be positive, and so when the interviewer would ask me questions, I would just do my best to relate to the concept, even if I didn't understand it. So there was this one question he asked me. He said, do you know what hoisting is? And for any JavaScript experts in the room, don't judge me for not knowing this, but I didn't know it. And I said, he explained it to me. And I said, oh, well, there's this similar concept in C++, and it works like this. And the interview went on, and it wasn't my best interview, but it worked out. And at the end, I looked up the terms I didn't understand, and I realized I was completely wrong in my relation to the C++ concept. Totally wrong. Well, my interviewer had no idea, because I said it confidently. Now, I'm not trying to encourage you to BS your way through interviews. It can backfire really quickly if they're more familiar with what you're talking about. But I do say it just as an example to show you that confidence can really come into play in the interview process. So, you're reaching for new opportunities. You're nailing the interviews. And now maybe you have a new job. Confidence can also come into play in the workforce and how successful you are at your job. This is also where imposter syndrome starts to come into play. Maybe you BS'd your way through the interview, and now you're worried they're going to find out. We recently hired a new engineer a few months ago. And In her first week on the job, she set up a meeting with me to go over some questions she had. And I was trying to explain the answers. I started giving her this high-level architectural overview of our code. And I only got a few sentences in when she stopped me. And she said, "Back up, you lost me, I don't understand." So I said, "Oh, okay." Went back to the beginning, started again. We got a little farther. She'd say, "I don't understand." So we kept going like this a few times until we hit a point where she's like, "Okay, I've gathered enough information for the day, thank you. I'll get back to you when I have more questions." It took a lot of confidence on her part to admit that she did not understand, especially her first week on the job and to the tech lead of the project. Many people at this point would start to experience imposter syndrome and to be like, "Well, I got the job. I'm supposed to understand what she's talking about, but I don't." They might assume it's some lacking on their part. But it actually wasn't. In this case, what I realized when I was having this conversation with this engineer is that I was using all this esoteric terminology that was only specific to my small domain, and no new hire would have understood what I was talking about. I had had the context of these terms for years, and I was saying them as if they had that context. I'd say the term embeddables, pipeline, expression language, and if I did, maybe I gave a cursory explanation, but I'd rush through it. Now, if you have the confidence to admit that you don't understand something, you'll be better off. She left those meetings with way more knowledge than the new hires that went before her, who just nodded along and didn't really understand. And so it can have success. It can impact your success at work. Okay. So, let's say you're reaching for new opportunities, you've secured those opportunities, you are being very confident, and now maybe you are being offered leadership positions. Now you might actually run into the situation on the opposite side of the spectrum, which is being perceived as too confident, direct, or maybe even aggressive. When I first joined Elastic about 3 years ago, I joined as a software engineer. And about a year into that, I was offered the position of area lead on a team of 3 people, myself included. And area lead's responsibilities are about 20% leadership stuff, roadmap planning, organizational stuff, and 80% coding. So even though I was pretty nervous to take it on, I historically was a little hesitant. I really enjoy my heads down coding. I thought it was a good opportunity to get my feet wet and try it out. So I accepted the position, and it went well. And about a year later, I was offered another position of tech lead in charge of about 30 engineers. And this was a big leap. Tech leads are supposed to write code, but will rarely have time for it. I found myself in a lot of new situations that I didn't have the skill sets, or they were a little rusty. Communicating direction that other people might not agree with. It was a much different feeling to be an engineer and go to your tech lead and say, "I really think something should be a certain way," than to be the tech lead and to have to say, "I think something should be a certain way," to 30 people and try to convince them to go that way when it's unlikely that you're going to get unanimous agreement. So, there was one particular situation where an area team was taking a path that I disagreed with. They wanted path A, I wanted path B. So I drew up all these discussion points, and I said, these are the pros and cons, and I really think you should do path B. What do you think? Well, I didn't get much response back, and about a week later, I heard that the team was still gearing towards path A. So I was kind of frustrated, and I wasn't really sure what to do. There was another director there that had also voiced concerns about path A. So I asked him for advice. I said, "Listen, I'm really trying to push the team to do path B, but they're not being very receptive. Do you have any advice for me?" And he said, "At the end of the day, it is your responsibility for that decision. If you cannot defend that decision, You have every right to pull rank and tell them how it should be. I said, all right, this greatly clarifies my role, my responsibilities, thank you. It's like, I know what I'm gonna do. I can't defend Path A because I hadn't been given a lot of reasons for it. So I'm gonna go back to the area lead and I'm gonna tell him we really should do Path B. And the director said, no, drop the I think, just tell him. So I said, you're right, okay. I'll go to the area lead and I'll say we should do Path B. Are you okay with that? And the director said, no, don't open it up for more discourse, just tell him. So I mulled this over, and I crafted my message, and I sent it out. And a few days later, my team lead had a sync with me where she shared feedback with me that I was getting feedback that I was being too aggressive in my communication style. And she said she read the message in question, and she agreed it was a little aggressive. So I was like, ugh. I shared with her the feedback from the director and my frustration, and she shared with me her own story. She said when she first joined Elastic, she used qualifiers all over the place. I think, maybe, what do you think about? And she received feedback that she needed to be more direct, drop them. So she did. She dropped all qualifiers, and soon after received feedback that she was being too aggressive. There's a balance to be found in there somewhere, but it's difficult to find, and there will often be times when you just cannot please everybody. There will be times when it's appropriate to use qualifiers, and there will be times when you need to be direct. And when you find yourself in leadership positions, you're going to experience more of the latter. And if you do, and if you get negative feedback like I did, review the feedback, listen to it, review your messaging, see if you can improve. But don't start to doubt yourself. The more people you communicate with, the more chances there are for somebody to take something you said the wrong way. You could say the same thing to two different people and you would get two different reactions. So, sometimes there is no easy answer. Now, I share these stories with you because I want you to know that when you experience your own trials, I don't want you to jump to the conclusion that it is some lack on your own part, but just that this is something that everybody experiences. And I hope that you continue to believe in yourself and have confidence. Thank you.
So our next speaker is Jennifer Sertl. I hope so, I pronounce it correctly. She is president and founder of Agility 3R, a leadership development company dedicated to strengthening strategic skills and helping leaders become more resilient, responsive, and reflective. She is also co-author of Strategy Leadership and The Soul, published by Triarchy Press. She is currently social media ambassador on site for the Social Innovation Summit held biannually in Washington, D.C. and Silicon Valley. She helps build upstate New York through her work as a consultant and to Upstate Venture Connect and MedTech Association. So let's welcome Jennifer.
So I live in Rochester, New York, and so very excited to be here. And I've waited a very long time for this moment simply because I got my degree in existential philosophy from CU Boulder, and I'm originally from Denver. And whether you're working on interoperability and blockchain, or you're actually a student trying to find someone to sit with you at the lunch table, everything really is about identity and belonging. And so what I came to talk to you a little bit about today was the power of your voice, especially because of social media. And the interface I care the most about is the interface between you and you. A lot of people aren't really talking about that, but I think our own individual identity is under attack. And I am hopeful that there's maybe 2 or 3 things that you will get from me in this short time that will allow you more clarity on who you are and how you can protect yourself in the midst of all this, I'll call it macro seduction. So we'll call it social media as a platform strategy, and this is about mindset. Don't worry about notes. Anyone that would like slides, be sure to just give me your card and I'll make sure that you get them, because I want you to really focus on the content and not on, capturing it. Okay, and also how you feel when you hear what I have to say. So I work with a product that is called Interplay that helped people at Apple that did not have MBAs learn how to sell, because the platform sale in some of the larger companies really requires people to have an MBA, and often people in sales do not. So I wanted to share with you how I started tracking in 2002. If you notice this, the assets of Apple were $4.5 billion in tangible assets and less than $1 billion in intangible assets, right? And what I'm going to show you right now, as I did this the last time in January, where you can see the shift that out of all of the $737 billion worth of Apple, actually less than a sixth of it is tangible assets, and primarily most of it is intangible assets, right? So when I talk about intangible assets, what is that? That is organizational capital. Okay, all of you don't need a title to impact organizational capital inside of your organization, because it's the systems, tools, processes, leadership practices, cultural values. The reason I start with this is that I live in Rochester, which is fairly manufacturing, and a lot of people there don't think that you actually need to think globally because they sell locally. And every supply chain is global, and if you have an IP address, you're global. And I just really want you to understand that every single one of you has a significant way to contribute to the organizational capital of your business. And a lot of it has to do with your voice and how you choose to use it. So before anyone hires you, they're going to look you up online to leave, you want you to leave a digital trail of breadcrumbs. And it's amazing, even today, the people that I try and find on Twitter and LinkedIn, they're not yet using it in a way that they're actually clear that they're actually an asset, always an asset. Does that make sense? So in LinkedIn, there are 500 million people in the room, right? On Twitter, there are 321 million people in the room, right? And so, it's so important that we really understand how we use our voice on LinkedIn and Twitter. And it isn't just for marketing departments. And it isn't just for CEOs. Everyone is looking for talent, right? And everyone's looking for a place to belong. And so this is what I hope to share with you here. There's not enough time, but I think a lot of people think that social media really is just about sending out tweets and sending out messages. But I want you to know that really participating, clearing your voice, and really understanding yourself as an organizational asset requires all of these elements. Advisement, architecture, analyst, who's the recipient, the distributor, the producer. There's so much. And I almost feel like I want to legitimize some of these social media strategies because so many people are just using them in ways that I think are abusive rather than ways that are informative and useful. And so, have you heard the term push versus pull? Yeah. Okay. So I want you to think of yourself as a lighthouse. That if in fact you stand still and you absolutely have clarity on what you're pulsing, the right types of opportunities, the right types of people, and the right types of information will come to you. It's just a matter of realizing that we're in a pull game, not a push game. It isn't so much what you have to share, it's who you are and how clear you're standing still, and then anything that does come through you as a filter, that it really resonates with who you are. So, have many of you heard of Simon Sinek? Okay, so most of you have. Excellent. He has a TED Talk about why, and it is literally something that I have all of my clients watch at least once a month because it's just that repetition is really great. So people don't really care what you do, they care why you do it. Right? And this is a picture. I have 3 children, and this is for one of my eldest, and when she was 10, I drew for her Because one is that she's a soccer player, and I love soccer because it's an international sport. I don't want to hurt you because I'm about to use my hands. And so in terms of being a lighthouse, what you have to realize is that we are complex people, right? We're not like algorithms that you can put things in. We're much more complex than that. We have ideas, values, goals, and fears, and then you throw in some sugar, and then you throw in some caffeine, right? And so what many people don't realize is that the word to kill is a Greek word that means, decide is part of a Greek word that means to kill. So homicide is I actually kill someone else. Suicide is I kill myself, right? And to decide means to kill all other possibilities. So when you make a choice, it's a decision. And that's one of the greatest things about in the pull economy, is that when you make a choice, you're actually making a decision. And so the issue today is not information overload, it's filter failure. And so to help support you in actually being a lighthouse and really understanding your filters, I have 2 tools. One is as a strategy. It doesn't matter what your product is. What matters is actually how you're going to market. Because how you go to market is a strategy that probably will not change. What you sell probably will change. So from a business perspective, I ask people to choose only 3 out of these strategies, right? So there's innovation, premium, synergy, cost, know-how, delivery, velocity, and adaptability. Oftentimes I'll have people that want to work with me and they say, oh, well, we have a delivery and innovation strategy, right? I'm like, no way, can't do that. Because delivery is something that you do often and can create efficiencies of scale. And innovation is something that's never been done. And so this is really kind of a great to think about how do you have competing strategies. But this is the next slide is the one that's more important to you. Is the idea of what do you want to leave in your wake? How will you decide how to be a lighthouse personally and what to choose? And I'd say the same thing. I believe in triads, and Tesla believes in 3s and 9s and 6s. So let's go with that. Is that out of this complete list, if you think about your legacy and choose it early, you can actually help simplify how it is that you're a lighthouse. So I ask people to take this list and actually just to choose 3 that you think are part of who you are and what you want to leave, be it your family, be it your community, or be it your team. And what ends up happening is then you will find articles, and like, is there, Tammy, can I ask you, is there a certain word here that really resonates as part of something that's useful or something that you like?
Well, authenticity is a very major factor in how I run my business.
Fantastic. So if authenticity is one of her words, then on Wired magazine, in Fast Company magazine, in Harvard Business Review, in MIT, Sloan, there's so many different things. She can actually find a lot of articles about how to be authentic. And in so doing, if she continues to choose that and maybe 2 other words, and make sure that everything that comes through her LinkedIn or her Twitter exemplifies authenticity, it will allow her not only to practice it more because it's in her mind, but also allows people that look at her stream to actually see how important that value is to her, right? So I think most people really are excited but overwhelmed to participate. And if you can think of actually keeping it to 3 identity words, and then allow yourself to study those words, read books of those words, find thought leaders and influencers in those words, it changes you. It actually raises your self-esteem, and it actually has you even more impeccable with what is, whatever it is that you deeply care about. So mine, what you can do is this is kind of on steroids, right? Is that once you choose your 3 words, you can then really determine who they are, because authenticity to Tammy might be different for me. We might describe it differently, right? So I'd ask you to choose your 3 identity words and then codify them so that you have a way to show an image and ways to describe it, right? And so ever since 2005, I write in my journal once a week. And I share where I have been resilient, where I've been responsive, where I've been reflective. And then I have a delta, which isn't red pen, isn't that I suck, it's that where am I going to practice it? Because I know that my own identity relies on me practicing these core characteristics. I'm not as great as I want to be, but I'm better than I would have been had it not been part of my practice, right? So naming, claiming, and then actually exploding, and then practicing are really important ways to exemplify your own leadership identity. And I think in the time that we have, I think that's it. Thank you.
So let's welcome our speakers for our panel discussion. Susan Lundberg, yeah, owner of the Capital Tech Search for 19 years, and in 2018 she started the New York Tech Loop, which is an association focused on growing the software community. Let's welcome Susan. At the table with Susan will sit Shimantika Kumar. She has 20-year experience in various industries as marketing and sales roles. Her formal education is in marketing and advertising from the University of Illinois in Urbana-Champaign. Sam have worked in marketing roles for industries such as steel, healthcare, fintech, financial technology, and digital media. Currently, she is an entrepreneur and working on her first startup, which is a mobile app called Wiggle. Our next speaker to our panel discussion is Natalie Wysocki. Natalie studied information science at the University of Michigan. She has been working at Troy Web Consulting for almost 2 years as interaction design. She loves her work because it combines art, technology, and people. While she is still early into her career, she aspires to grow as a leader and as a technically skilled designer. And now I will give the microphone to Blain to moderate our panel discussion.
Great, thanks. So I'm going to sneak up over. I'll sit in the front. Then I'll talk to you, and you can talk to everybody else. You do? I wouldn't. Yeah, so we wanted to have a panel discussion with everybody here to sort of keep the conversation going from the talks that we had previously. So we want to dig a little bit deeper into these themes that we keep hearing about and real life experiences. How can we have better advocacy for diversity in the workplace? How they have to other colleagues that we have in the workplace that sort of help foster that as well. And we have some questions prepared, so we'll just we'll kick those off first, and then we'll eventually open it up to the room to group in everybody else who wants to contribute. So first off, can you tell us a bit how you make the case for diversity in your organization? What strategies do you use? Do you have other people that you sort of lean on for ideas? And has there been any successes in your organization so far that helped you promote diversity?
So as a technical recruiter, most of my employers want to hire women. There's no lack of interest in it. And the more women that are out there, the young girls, the developers, I have no problem placing them. And the encouraging thing is that most employers are looking for them. Not for nothing, but they don't want, 10 guys sitting around in a room, just hanging out. That's a scary thought. So if we can introduce a few women into the situation, you know, from the communication skills, everything. And I think it's just a matter of, you know, once an organization has one woman on their team, again, then they're more likely to grow from there.
I think in the work that I do as a designer and at a software firm where we build custom software for a variety of clients, having diversity in mindset is always very important to the work that we do. And particularly for what I do as a designer, it's part of my job to care about our clients' users and be able to empathize with them, as well as with our clients. That sense of empathy is much stronger when we have a diverse set of teammates across the board that can fill in the gaps in perspective and be able to contribute to those different ideas. I think we've found success in our company with that, and I think in part that comes from a very top-down sense of culture that our leadership really focuses on hiring new people that will fill those gaps in perspective.
Diversity to me means really more than just gender-based diversity. I'm a first-generation immigrant. I originally am from India. I was born and raised there. I came to this country when I was in my early 30s. So I had to go back to school again. I came here to the US leaving a job where I was 7 years into the job, had completed college. So, you know, I had to go back to college, complete grad school, deal with 2 recessions, 2001 and 2008. And all of this without having a work visa, as well as being as diverse as one could possibly imagine. So for me, the word diversity really is a whole nother game. I mean, I'm talking racial, cultural, literally had to relearn my English because English is spoken in every country that speaks English in a whole different way. I mean, when I came to the US, I was told, you're going to the US, you're going to be speaking Americanese, you know. So basically, diversity is a whole different game. So I experience diversity. For me, it is a matter of accepting it really multiculturalism and pluralism is how I define the word diversity. It goes well past just being, you know, gender acceptance. So working in multidisciplinary teams is how I view the idea, the concept of diversity. It brings a whole very, very new way of thinking about many different things because most of us are really creating, whether it's a product or a service, we are not the ones who are going to be consuming it. Someone else will, who will probably be of a mindset or be coming from an area of work or of application which is completely different. So this whole concept of having MBAs sit in a group or having only engineers sit in a group and talk doesn't lead very far. Now you bring into that group of an MBA, that group of MBAs, someone who is a graphic designer, and you see how the conversation transpires. Now they're going to be thinking about developing a product in a whole new way. Now bring into that someone else who's a user of the product. It's going to go a completely different direction. So for me, the concept is one of multidisciplinary teams. I have always worked in companies where I've been in very highly male-dominated industries and only female, working among engineers, but coming from what in India, I was an English major. I actually moved into advertising and marketing after I came here. So I was a completely coming from, you know, soft skills, working with engineers and financial people, a total misfit. But they wanted me there because I came with a different from a different perspective and could talk to them about things in a way which they never even considered. So basically, multidisciplinary approach is what I think is the name of the game as far as diversity is concerned.
And you mentioned, Natalie, that it was sort of like a top-down, sort of like cultural thing that diversity is like really important. Is there any like more specific like either policies or practices or like actual strategic tactics that any of you have experienced like through your career so far, of like how you like why diversity worked and is continuing to still work?
Sure. So in the application of the work that I do, we're a relatively small company, and everyone that gets hired, there's special care put into who that person is and whether or not they fit into our culture. And part of the culture that we try to create is one that encourages diversity and is inclusive. And part of the reason that it's so critical for the work that we do is because we work in multidisciplinary teams where we've got developers and designers and quality assurance and marketing all having shared conversations about a product. And in order for those conversations to be productive and cordial, collaborative, we all have to be able to see where the other one is coming from, be inclusive, you know, and of course we're all people. So some of us are maybe louder than others or shyer, and that's something where having a diverse mindset, whether it's your background, whether you're an engineer or designer, or just someone that can facilitate inclusiveness, that's what's really valued. So our strategies come from the people that we hire in knowing that they'll have the behavioral skills to be inclusive and enable their teammates to bring out all of those ideas.
I think regardless of your organization, if you remember the golden rule of treating others as you want to be treated, that's the core. I think the other thing that is missing so much in today's environments is we get focused on ourselves and not understanding where that other person is coming from. And there's been a number of really recent good videos that talk about how girls are brought up, and there's wonderful talks that can talk about the difference between the male and the female and how the male compartmentalizes, and you know the female's brain is all the synapses are going. And you have to take a step back and think about that, and maybe think about, okay, this is the way I'm interpreting it, but how is that other person processing, and what's their perspective? You know, I grew up with two brothers. So when I was the youngest, if you asked them, they would tell you I was bossy since the day I was born. And they're 6 and 7 years my senior, you know, and but I felt like I had to fight, you know, because I had 2 older brothers, and you know, so that obviously became part of my personality trait, and it shows through to this day. You know, so it's always important to understand, and when you're getting a group involved, to understand what are the dynamics of the group, what is going to make a group work better, and regardless of the situation, you know, to sometimes take a step back when people are going to disagree, and you're not always going to collaborate, and one person's going to take path A or path B, and you really know that A is right, you know, and figure out when is it appropriate to assert and when is it appropriate to get the buy-in that you need. And we get so caught up with going fast that we rush past that process. You know, but I think if everybody still focuses on the golden rule of treating others as they want to be treated, we'll have a nice work environment.
Do you want to say anything?
No,
Okay.
I don't really.
No, that's great. Actually, it leads me into a really good question. So now, like we've had like really good work environments, really diverse group of people. Is there any specific examples that come to mind that one of your colleagues may have either stood up for you, or you've seen stood up for somebody else to sort of like support that that culture? Or even on the reverse, was there times where you maybe felt uncomfortable that something happened that maybe should have been addressed differently?
You know, I would say something Stacey said that caught my attention today, where she was battling with should I be a little bit more aggressive and direct, or should I be more like tentative in my, the way I voice my? So we have all of us need approval, and we need affiliation, right? We all want to belong with a group, and we don't want to even body language that is disapproving towards us, and we have our antennae. We will perceive it when someone is disapproving of us, even though they're smiling and nodding, and we have our antenna up, and we will perceive it. That this person and I not quite getting along, though we are trying very hard to. So I think, what was your question? One more time, can you repeat?
Just if there was any specific examples that you
Yeah.
would experience.
So that thing, I think that happens a lot. We have this high need for approval, and people will sometimes, reach out to us to try and be approving, but to help us out. But I don't think it always necessarily works out that way. We have to be decisive, decide, kill other options, and take one path and go with it. The confidence has to, if you believe that this is a specific thing you need to do, you kill other options and go with one thing and go for it. That is very important, with or without someone definitely supporting you or not.
I would say for me personally, I was very lucky that early in my career, I had two great mentors. And I was dove in college. I happened to go into the competitive swim industry. So I went in, even then, into a male-dominated industry. And I was very lucky that I had two great, happened to be male mentors who just empowered me to make good decisions, taught me along the way. And I think it's interesting is, again, whether it's a male or a female, to realize that if you have benefited from a good mentor, you have an obligation to make sure that you are doing it for somebody else. And one of the things that's really interesting, and we could probably have a whole nother conversation about it, sometimes I find that women are not as good mentors to other women as men can be. Yeah, I'm seeing a lot of the heads nodding out here. I sort of don't want to open that can of worms, but I want to raise the awareness of it, that we need to make sure, we're all talking about how do we help women, how do we better balance. If we can't mentor, our own fellow female, we've got to take a step back and realize that, we're not threatened by them. This is a good thing. At the same token, when you get that compliment from a coworker, don't deflect. Women tend to deflect. You just hear that. You hear the oh. Thank you.
Well, like Susan, I think I've been very fortunate in my journey to get to where I am. Also, like Susan, I've grown up with two older brothers and felt that similar sense of having to fight or having to be bossy or outspoken. And definitely I think that's a trait that I've carried through to where I am now. But what I like about that and about where I work is that because it's a small company, everyone has an opportunity to step up and lead. If you have a good idea, you should go for it. You should walk into our CEO's door and share it with him and start trying to take it somewhere. And so I think in particular, I've had support from the leadership that's at my company in nurturing the fact that I can be direct and I can be confident with the ideas that I have, and they've really enabled me to grow into a leadership position and see where I can go with it, because I've really only been working for hardly 2 years, but I feel like I've had so many leadership opportunities and it's been so encouraged. It's put me in a really fortunate position. And so as Susan said, I think one thing I'd like to do more of in the future is finding a way to carry that forward to other people that might be starting out their careers, just like I have been, to enable them to say, hey, just because you're new doesn't mean you can't be a leader, and just because you're a woman and you might be bossy, that doesn't mean you're too bossy. You can, if you have good ideas, stick to them. So yeah.
Thank you. Actually, I kind of want to ask the audience if they have any experiences like that they wanted to share, just in their work or anywhere else. Anybody feeling adventurous?
Hi, I'm Annmarie, and I have a speech condition that makes it hard for me to sound authoritative and knowledgeable, and I'm also really good at math. So I've always worked in male-dominated fields, but it's kind of hard to compete sometimes because literally people interrupt, they talk over me, whatever. So I finally got to the point where I do it right back. And then I found out that when women do it, it's called interrupting. When men do it, it's called competitive turn-taking.
So how did you come out on top? Did you have an advocate that you work with that sort of helped you with that, or did you just all on your own?
It's been different in a lot of different situations, but I've always worked in male-occupied fields, and sometimes I'm the only woman, sometimes I'm the woman. And when people get to know me, they usually understand that I have to start saying what I'm going to say, actually before you finish, in order to be the next one in the conversation. And it's not that I'm doing it on purpose, but I have to think ahead or I won't be able to vocalize. And it's a orphan condition, nobody knows about it, no one has it. It took me 11 years to be diagnosed, started when I was 14 years old. So it's had a huge influence on my life, just because people don't understand. So in being in the conversations, I'll be right in there. Some people resent it, some people understand, some people don't care, well, the biggest story. So it's it's variable that way, but also just remember the invisible disabilities or the unknown disabilities that someone might have that you might not know, like shyness, crippling shyness. Some people are crippled by it, or even like being perceived as being too superior, or people that are good at something and they know it, and they think that they're good and they're going to come out with everything, and then the other people might resent them because of the same thing that you're talking about with the imposter syndrome. So don't think just because a person is a woman that she's not good at math, or she's not confident, or she's not forceful. It's not. It has nothing to do with gender.
Great, thank you. That was great.
Well, I have an interesting one where it took me about 2 years of dealing with a developer who very much intimidated me. I was a developer, moved into business analyst, and as I was a business analyst, solely responsible for the requirements for this one project, and this developer and I would butt heads. And it didn't help that he was 6'1" and very loud. So I would go and I would always go over like shrinking, just kind of tiptoeing, like what's he gonna say? He's gonna say no. How am I going to communicate this? I know the stakeholders want this. Tons of fear, tons of intimidation, tons of insecurity. One day, though, I just said, I've had enough. I've had absolutely enough. And I said, okay, every time I go to him, he tells me no, immediately. And then after he thinks about it a while, he comes back and agrees with my position. So, Tammy, what are you going to do here? How are you going to handle the next one? So I finally, with some confidence, went to him and I said, here's what we need to do. This is what they're asking for. I think we might have a challenge here, but, and he started to go with, well, we can't. I said, no. I said, please, listen, I'm going to give this to you, this whole package, and I'm going to walk away. And I want you to review it. And I don't want to hear from you for 24 hours. Set up a meeting with me for the day after next, and then let's have the conversation. And from that day on, we were the best of partners developing that system, and it took me 2 years to figure out what I needed to do to get over the intimidation and fear of this guy that just was, I thought was so intimidating. So,
Blain,
Great.
there's I'll have him get you in a second. There's I don't know the name of the book. I was hoping to get it before today's presentation. A friend was telling me there's a book that's written, and it talks about how, specifically people my generation, the difference how boys were raised to be competitive and girls were raised to play house And we work that we want everybody, we want the nice family, we want everybody to get along. And boys were taught to be competitive. And you need to take that into consideration. I don't know the name of the book. If anybody can figure it out, we could say it before the end. But it really is something you need to take into consideration when you're dealing with or struggling with whether it's another woman or a guy on the job.
Hi, I'm Stacey from Albany Can Code. In my last job, I worked in healthcare IT, and the company I worked for was great. They had, Vermont diversity, so, a lot of women, but not many people of color, because there aren't that many in Vermont, as it turns out. But one of the things the women did there, we had read an article written by one of the women in the Obama administration, and they were tired, of course, of being spoken over and having their ideas just kind of ignored. And so what they did was they started sort of tag teaming, right? So a woman would bring an idea to the table in a meeting, and another woman at the table would say, I think what Jenny is trying to say is that if we, and then restate the opinion or the idea while giving credit to the woman who'd brought the idea up in the first place. And it was a way for them to sort of echo each other's ideas and get them heard more. So we started doing that in meetings and found that it had a great impact. The other thing you guys touched on, which I think is important, is that women don't often make good mentors for other women. And I think part of that is that we're used to almost being treated like the token woman in any environment. Like, I am Stacey, representative of all womanhood, and so when you're in positions like that, it's easy to see other women as a threat to your position, because if you're taught to be excited that there's one woman at the table, then my gosh, what is going to happen with two women? That can't stand for very long. They must be after my position as the representative of all womanhood. And so what I have found that has worked for me is to vigorously and insistently support all the women around me. It's hard for anyone to get into a competitive spirit with you when you are one of their most determined supporters. When you're restating their ideas, making sure they get credit, when you're calling out their hard work, when you're, helping them through difficulties in the office, it's really hard for any competitive spirit to stand. And, eventually, like, when people figure out, like, you're for real, you really do want to support them, you really do want to be in their corner, they, it turns the whole script on its head. Because we're not used to women doing that. We're not used to, like, sort of forming this posse in the office to help each other get to our best work. And so that's a tactic that I've used a lot, and it works really well. And it works just as well, actually, in your private life as it does in your professional life. So that's just what I wanted to add.
Great, thank you. I'm actually going to continue. As she was reading my mind, I was going to ask, okay, how can we actually start to advocate for women? Because we talked about it, like attacking each other and not being very supportive. Like, let's put that back on the panel. And I want to ask that question to you guys.
No, definitely. I mean, if someone says something that is of merit and of substance, then I would advocate for that person, man or woman, I mean, if it's a woman, great. Great. If it's a man, I'd advocate for that person too. So I would not. I think we have oftentimes as women not been given we haven't found ourselves in a position where we have the authority to come across as do I have maybe we have questioned ourselves as to, do I have the ability to even, or is there any value in my saying someone else is good? What value is there? Maybe that, because a lot of women have not been in leadership roles, they have wondered, well, I'm just a fledgling, person here, a newbie or a rookie. Is there any value to me saying that someone else, if it came from someone more senior, maybe it would add value, but we have questioned whether we have the ability to add value to and appreciate or advocate for another woman. But something of merit deserves to be advocated for, man or woman, I would say, and I would advocate.
I think the other thing is to give the person an opportunity. When, when you're looking around the room, think about, when the teacher, are you always calling on the person who raises their hand versus, okay, let's play fair. Everybody gets a chance to lead. And that's a strong leader regardless. And you sometimes find out who your shining stars are that you don't know.
I think what's interesting about what Susan said is that there might be so many shining stars that are there and you just don't know. And as it had been mentioned in some of the other things we talked about, some people are really shy. And so even in the case of maybe just calling on someone to, give them the opportunity, they may not take it. And that can happen. I've experienced it in school and I've experienced it at work sometimes, that people may either feel like they don't have a good idea or they're just too shy to bring it up. And so I think one of the ways to help enable other women and really anyone, but if we're talking about women, is to get to know them as a person and go back to that sense of empathy and then decide how you can best help them grow into a better version of themselves. Is it sticking up for them in the boardroom? Is it echoing what they said to just make it come across as a louder idea? Or maybe is it talking to them after a meeting or before a meeting to really just encourage them to pursue that idea or encourage them to go talk to someone else that maybe is a really good person for them to bring that idea to, but they didn't. So you can definitely advocate, I think, vocally and upfront, but also behind the scenes to just be that supporting voice for them. And I think for some people that's maybe what they need, is just that continuous, unyielding sense of support to help shoo away the doubt or the imposter syndrome, to really encourage them to at least keep working at it.
That's great. So let's sort of zoom into, since we're at a technology event, let's sort of apply all of this stuff that we've been talking about to the technology industry. Are there any really big misconceptions about working in the tech sector as a woman today, or what specific challenges that are you finding based in technology are sort of top of mind that we need to sort of overcome and talk about more and address?
Even though I work in technology, I work on the soft skills side of it. As a technology recruiter, I tell everybody I couldn't write a line of code if my life depended on it. And I do mean that. Again, I think the misperception or the challenges, it does all come down to the soft skills in the end, because you whether someone is good in math or can write code, that's sort of a checking of the box. They might be better than somebody else, and somebody might write code more articulately, might be better at databases, but where you can make a difference does still come down to the soft side. And understanding is that person a little shy, or so do you need to reach out to them before? And in technology, as a recruiter, I'm always trying to make suggestions. Well, did you try this? Have you talked to this person? And if they're better with, hey, I really just want to do QA, that's okay. You don't have to, in technology, and what's been good to see companies over the years is, in order to advance, you don't have to manage anymore. You have companies who have technology tracks that you can just keep getting promoted and promoted based on your technical expertise. And that maybe is better for the introvert, whether you're a male or a female. Then there's others who, specifically women, who normally tend to get sucked into management. But now they have an option that they can stay technical if they say, no, I'd really rather still code. I don't want to be managing 30 people. God bless you, Stacey. From a technology point of view, at least there's options now.
One thing that I think we'll get better over time as we continue to have pushes for getting more women into the field and creating a space for more female role models, is that we'll have more women role models there, because I think one of the conceptions right now is, along with the understood idea that you have to code, well, no, maybe you don't. But on the other side, people might think that I'm gonna have to work with coders, you know, or I'm gonna be surrounded by a bunch of mean software engineers that are gonna be mean to me because I'm a female. And I think the more that we can build the momentum of having women in the tech industry be visible, be role models, and both be software engineers, be coders, but also not. You know, I'm a designer and I have to empathize with all of our developers, but I don't necessarily have to develop. And I think making sure that that is cleared up as a misconception is that you don't necessarily have to be a developer, but also not all developers are rude, like nerdy people that won't accept you. You know, there's definitely space for women to move into.
What was your question one more time?
Sort of like zooming in on like all the stuff that we've been talking about previously, like how does that really relate to like technology?
So
or
one thing I want to say is this, that, you know, I've always worked in technical fields, but as a non-tech person, as a marketing person. And it's okay. I mean, Steve Jobs didn't write a line of code himself. I mean, and he's one of the biggest techies we think of now, if there's ever was one. I mean, a technical innovation. So you don't have to be a techie per se yourself, but it's very important, and this is how I've survived, to know the industry. It's extremely important to understand the industry, the market, the competition, and what people want. And if you know that, that's very important, because that's where the product or the service is going. So that's been my experience, and that's why I've been valued as a marketing person in finance. I don't know too much about finance, but I knew the industry. I got to know the industry very well. In steel, metallurgy, people asked me, are you a metallurgist yourself? I would be talking to metallurgists, showing them a steel plant, manufacturing facility. In healthcare marketing, and a little bit in higher education, as well as in digital media, which was completely different. But finance and steel, metallurgy, very, very technical fields. I found myself an outsider, but I knew the industry, and that's how you get ahead, or you get yourself accepted. Acceptance is important. I think that's one thing we find ourselves as non-techies. Techies tend to bond together and have a disdain for non-techies. That's the vibe they give us. That's the vibe we get. Unless then you come across as someone who is aware of the industry, and then you get acceptance. Because after all, we are all working for the industry and for the product or the service to be consumed by somebody, because if it's not going to get bought, then there's no industry. So knowing the industry is very, very important.
So speaking of the industry, like why technology? Why did the three of you decide technology as opposed to staying in finance or going into a different job elsewhere? Like what's exciting about the tech industry? Like knowing all the challenges that we seem to have with diversity, why technology?
So my story was, when I was changing, I'd moved back to the area and I was changing jobs, I needed to reinvent myself. And, you know, the internet and technology was just starting to emerge. And I said, I don't know what this is, but I think this is where I want to be. And I tell the story, the first time somebody said Oracle to me, I was like, Orca, are we talking about whales? I was like, you know, I had to learn operating systems. I had to learn programming languages, you know, every kind of database there was. And it's exciting. And it's where the future is. The thing that's interesting to me as a technology recruiter is anybody who's my age or thereabouts, you know, when you were a kid, if you were a girl, my mom was a teacher. I grew up thinking I wanted to be a second grade teacher, just like my mom and my grandmother. You know, and if you're a boy, you know, quite often if your father was successful, he was probably an attorney or a doctor. And so you talk to my peers, and it's like, well, why'd you become an attorney or a doctor? Well, that's what my father did. That's what I heard talked about at the dining room table, at the kitchen table every night. You know, now to women, there's so many more options. And technology is exciting. Technology, I think, you know, most people are out there going, wow, this is the wave of the future. I want to work in this in some way, shape, or form. You know, manufacturing, unfortunately, is really struggling, you know, so you got to keep moving forward. The college majors that exist now didn't exist 20 years ago, and what will exist 20 years from now are going to be completely different.
Susan, I feel like we're going to have a parking lot conversation. My mother is also a teacher, and my dad is a teacher as well. So I think for me, some of those early beginnings, I learned a lot, a lot from my parents, and they, in them teaching me a lot of what they taught me, I developed an appreciation for what it means to teach, and again, empathize. That's my word of the evening, is understanding the way that other people think. And for the longest time, I didn't really know what I wanted to do. I didn't decide that I wanted to go be a designer in the tech industry until halfway through college, when I met a girl in the hallway once, and you know, she lived in my dorm, and I asked her what she was studying, and she started raving to me about this program she was in, and I was like, wow, that sounds really good to me too. Because we did a program that was sort of a dual design and information analysis program. So I was exposed to coding and data analytics. I learned Python. I was an instructional aide for an introductory Python coding class. And that was great for me because I got to teach Python to students. But what really pulled me into design is that I could still care about people, because that's a lot of what design is caring about how people think, what makes sense to them, what makes something feel easy. And you also have to care about computers and technology and code, whether or not something will work. And you also care about art, whether or not something is appealing or designed visually well. And that's really what brought me to my position as an interaction designer. I think, as I put in my bio, is just that it's really an intersection between people, technology, and art. And that's what I love about it. And I think for me, I wasn't deterred by the challenges in the tech industry, because I was so fortunate to have support and be kind of bossy and be used to the idea that if I want to do that, I can do that, and I'm going to make it happen. So I've been fortunate in that sense. Yeah.
So we have about 4 minutes left, and I want to give you one last question, maybe get a quick answer from each of you. So as we're just seeing more and more women come into the tech industry and sort of be empowered to make their large impact on what the industry has become today. As we look back, we have the big conglomerates of Apple and Google and Facebook all started by men. So how do we keep this wave going so that we can continue to bring more of the empathy and bring more of the compassion and more of what women bring to the workforce to sort of bring the technology industry into the future that we want to have especially a safe future with what everything is coming out.
I think there's two things that are going on. First of all, it does go back to realizing that women can empower women. There are more and more startup investment firms that are only investing in women-owned companies, whether they're technology or whether they're non-technology. Even if you look at some of the small seed funds that are, helping women throughout the world, interestingly enough, the women do a much better job of paying back their loans than other, if you're talking about microloans. in third world countries, if they lend to women, they have a much higher rate of payback than when they lend to men. It's probably the same as probably true from a VC perspective too. I think women, the idea of taking on debt to start a company is daunting, and they take it with such sense of okay, I'm not going to go out and, you know, buy the most lavish office space I can do. They're probably still going to be pinching their pennies, and, you know, but they're less risk. We're still a little risk adverse. You know, that's really an issue. And I think, you know, moving forward, if we're a little bit more of a risk taker, and we know that it's okay to fail, I think that's the other difference things, whether it's technology, you know, whether going back to Amanda with the game, boom, you fail, you get back up. Women in general need to learn that that's more acceptable.
Like with so many other parts of culture, I think, and like sociology, just the way that we behave as people, many of these challenges that we've been discussing are so subtle sometimes, and they can be hard to think about if you stop asking questions or stop engaging with it. So I think one of the ways to really keep the momentum going is to keep asking those questions and keep having events like this, keep reminding each other that the challenges are still there and that we have to work through it. And as with anything else, I think it gets better with time, that the more we can encourage discourse about it and have role models that are visible for young ones, they can see that maybe the tech field that we're describing now is not necessarily the tech field that we're painting the picture for them to see. I think if we can paint the picture for the younger generations of what we want the industry to be, then that's what they'll see it as, and that's what they'll grow into.
I think women, it is a fact that, I mean, men and women are different in many ways. There's no point in denying that. We are not equal, we are not the same. We are equal but not the same. So women do have more of a confidence problem, or at least men are better at disguising it. Let's admit that. And women have a higher need for approval, or for being liked or not being disliked. Men seem to be able to, again, disguise that, or disguise their, aversion for disapproval. They'll manage without approval if they have to, but women have a higher need for approval. So that is definitely the case. So confidence is a huge thing that's lacking. It's a fact that women will not apply for. Women are conservative by nature. I don't know if it is, it's something in our biology, if there's a biological basis for it as nurturers. I mean, what is the reason that men and women are different? Maybe, millions of years ago, evolution, it's maybe evolutionary. I mean, because men were supposed to go out and hunt, and women were supposed to gather and take care of babies at home. I don't know why we are different, why we've evolved to be different. But we do have different psychological needs. We feel fulfilled with different things. We enjoy doing different things. And some of the choices we make are not because of society, not because of culture, or not because of unequal opportunities, but of our own choosing. So we choose those differences ourselves. So, we do go, I mean, when we are little, we do go for the doll, and the guy goes for the truck. And I don't know that someone tells us or teaches us. It's something in our brains, in our psychology, and I don't have the research or the knowledge to know what it is or why it is or where it comes from, but it is. And the more we acknowledge it, then we begin to deal with it. It is best to acknowledge it and admit to it. And maybe there is research, or we need to read up about it and understand it better, and then we can deal with it.
Okay, so next we have another lightning talk. We have Annmarie Lanesey.
You got it.
I have to do a lot of practice today. In 2008, Annmarie co-founded Grain Tree Technology, a New York State certified woman-owned business enterprise. And in 2016, Annmarie founded Albany Can Code, an organization dedicated to helping talented local people from all backgrounds find pathways to employment in the regional technology sector. She serves on the board of Albany Can Code, WMHT, and the Capital Region Chamber. So let's welcome Annmarie.
Thank you.
Next to her would be her best friend.
My boss.
boss. Miriam Dushane, managing partner of Alant Workforce Solutions, which is recognized as one of the nation's leading firms in helping employers attract, acquire, engage, and retain the best talent. So let's welcome Miriam also. And And I will let them to talk about Albany Can Code.
Okay, awesome. Thank you. Okay, it's awesome to be here. I'm just going to familiarize myself with how to switch through here. Maybe Linda will help. Oh, I was going the wrong way. Okay, thank you. So we do have some slides, but they're mostly just beautiful photos of the wonderful work of Albany Can Code. And I have to just start by saying, I sat in the back row there, and I was like, wow, there's like 5 students right in front of me. And oh my gosh, the next row too. And then I kept looking, I'm like, oh wait, there's more and more and more all the way up. And there's like, I think I counted 12 students of Albany Can Code, either in a current class or a prior round, and that just feels super exciting to me. So really glad to be here. And just also wanted to say that we have a few people in the crowd that I would just be ridiculous not to mention because they really are where the magic happens. And we have Jason Noxon in the back, if he will just give us a wave. Yay! He's our instructor at our Wilton front-end web development class, and you all heard from the brilliant Stacey Brissett, our program manager, who's here tonight. And Miriam Dushane, as was mentioned, is our board chair, but so much of the work that we do at Albany Can Code would not happen without her tremendous support and the support of her organization, which is really above and beyond. So thank you to Miriam. And we're going to tag team this kind of talk together about Albany Can Code, and I don't know, I'll speak for myself. I won't say we're both long-winded, but I know I am, so we'll do our best to balance.
I have permission to punch her and tell her to be quiet.
Yes.
Can you hear me? On? Oh, you can. Okay, because I can't hear myself, so that's why I wanted to just check.
Cool. So I need the clicker. Oh, you have the clicker. Okay. You want me to take the clicker? Or you want to click? You click.
You can click.
Okay. Cool. We didn't practice.
So we
Can
didn't.
you tell?
So this is like this
Awesome.
is the first time we've actually done it like this together.
Yeah.
So it's really exciting because Annmarie has one perspective on this organization, and I have another perspective and a reason why I'm interested in the organization. So I think it's interesting to see both sides of it, but it's going to kind of be like this little like back and forth with us in a good way to just describe the organization and all the great things it's doing. One of the things that I'd like to just mention really briefly is, as I was told not to take notes. I didn't take notes during yours, but I did take notes because what I wanted to tie into is just this theme of what we're talking about this evening, and actually how Albany Can Code is bringing a lot of this to reality. So just, you mentioned that there's 12 students here, but they're all women. So, yeah,
Woo-hoo.
yay, we should be celebrating that. And I think some of the things that we've talked about in terms of what our challenges are or what the opportunities might be and some of the obstacles, I'm proud to be part of an organization that's helping address that, because it's sometimes not just about education and education in technology. There's all sorts of other things that we have to consider and really deal with as a society, not just one organization or another. So I'll give it back to Annmarie so she can kind of tell you about the inception of the organization, and then I can share why I got involved and why I think it's so important.
Yeah, okay. So here's a picture. This is our office. My office for Green Tree Technology is no longer in Troy. What a bummer, I know. But this was the office that I would look out the window when Albany King Code was formed. So this was the view outside my window. We were on the corner of Broadway and 4th, right down the street, not far from here. So in 2009, I founded a software consulting practice based in Troy called Green Tree Technology with my husband. Some people know him, not many do, because he never leaves his computer, which is very exciting as co-founder of a software company. That's what I want him to do. Not great for our marriage, but that's a whole nother story. Anyways, as a woman founder of a tech company, at the time that I founded it, and still till today, there's not a ton of women leading technology organizations in the capital region. I don't think that's a good thing. I am very much always looking around, and was talked about sociology and sort of demographics and constantly looking at where are all the women. I don't see them. This room is very full tonight. I'm really excited to see that. But at this time, my company started to get just press and articles and all of that just because simply the fact that I was a woman was like newsworthy. Well, that's not okay with me. So anyways, I'll get back to this founding story about there being hidden talent anywhere. The sort of genesis, there's a bunch of different points of genesis for Albany King Code, and why I'm excited to be here tonight to talk about it, because when I was in high school, there was no difference between girls and boys. Like, we all did, if you excelled in class, like, there wasn't really a lot of gender, differences at that time for what I saw. But when I got to college, I went to a college right up here in this town on the hill. There was classes of maybe 100 women. There'd be 100 people, there'd be 10 women. Class of 10, there'd be 1. And I started to notice, well, why are I went to Troy High School, literally across the street from RPI. And why didn't many of the girls in my class make it across the street to this Polytechnic Engineering Institute? I don't know. Actually, I do know. And I would argue it is because of the way that culture and the books actually do tell us, you should be reading, you should be playing with Barbies and not doing Legos. And some of that's changing, but it's not changing quick enough. So anyways, fast forward to RPI, and I just, I looked around and there weren't all that many women, and you really had to kind of sort of pay attention to that fact. It became really obvious that you were one of the only girls in the room, for better or worse. And then fast forward to the software company. So Green Tree Technology, and many of the great software companies in this capital region area, there's so much great work being done here, and everybody's struggling to find talent. So I met a woman, Susan Lundberg, who's also in the room tonight. I tell this story over and over. She came to me and she said, I have a guy that's taught himself Ruby on Rails. He never went to college. He's worked in a kitchen. You talk about needing Ruby developers. You talk about wanting to develop talent. Well, maybe you want to give him a shot. I said, maybe. That sounds like a good idea. And he came on and he sat next to a guy that had a 4-year computer science degree from one of the top tier colleges and in the capital region, and he sped right past him. And so 2 months in the job, I'm like, he's actually moving faster than the guy that has a paper that says he's good at this. And then I realized that's the corner that I looked out and I said, you know what? It wasn't that girl right there, or that person. I'm like, that person could be a developer too. So there's people all across our capital region, all across the state, all across the country that have aptitude but don't know they have it in them because schools didn't teach it to me. They're still largely not teaching it now. And so we set out to do this work. So just another picture of downtown Troy. I would bet many of these people in this photo could have the aptitude to be software engineers. And if not a software engineer, then a Scrum Master. And not if a Scrum Master, then a UX designer. And by the way, these are all high-paying jobs. So not only just the development role, but roles all across the sector aren't being filled quick enough. And Miriam can tell you all about that. So just quickly, the Albany King Code has grown very fast. So we set out to, do a little pilot program, and we had 70 people. We put up a website, we built a curriculum, and I think more than 70 people applied. We're like, wow, there's a lot of people that are interested in the tech sector. And we accepted 12, and that was the beginning. And that quickly, the next round, we doubled. So we went from 12 to 20. And then in the next year, we went from 20 to 40. And right now, it's April of 2019, we have almost 50 students right now going through our program. We have 4 classes across 4 counties. We're really proud. A year ago, we started to notice that many people that were coming to our program were, white male, college educated. So the traditional, like what it looks like in the software sector, kind of were coming because they kind of know about it. So we realized we had to reach farther into the community to find people and to say, you know what, you actually might have the aptitude too. I know you never thought about it, and I know you might not believe you do, but we believe you do. And we've been doing that work. And we're reaching farther into communities, and we just launched this amazing program with the YWCA here in Troy, and we have a digital literacy program that we're doing now, getting women ready to go into the front-end web development class. And we really said, you know what, this is great. We sort of serve two sectors. We serve employers. We really want to find employees for employers in the region. We want to develop the tech sector, but we also want to provide opportunities to people that need opportunity, and so we're sort of serving both. And we realized, you know what, we're going to have to work harder. We want to find women. We want to find people of color. We want not only gender and racial diversity, we want economic diversity too. So we're reaching into communities of people that, you know, may never have thought of this path for them. So we're really excited and proud to do that. With that, I think as an overview, I'll let Miriam, you know, jump in, because like I said, I can get quite long-winded here, or punched, please note.
No, I want you to do as much talking as possible. So Annmarie came to me, and I don't even remember exactly what was the catalyst, but we met and started like seeing each other at different things and different events, and we were in the same places at the same time, and she invited me to lunch one day, and we started talking about Albany Can Code, and she shared with me essentially her concept of what she was building and how far they had come along. And originally for me, it was really important because I, like Susan, am a technology recruiter in the Capital Region. I've been in this region for 25 years. But I see that there's a need for not only talent in the region, but more diverse talent. And the diverse talent for me isn't just race, gender, the typical things that we think of or the law tells us are the right things that we should be thinking about when it comes to diversity. I think of things like generational differences. I think of things like educational diversity and differences in education. I think of things like our political views, which is a hot topic, obviously, in our climate that we have right now, and actually can cause a lot of strife in a workplace. So I try to think of it from that perspective. And then the biggest thing for me is, and something that we talked about quite a bit here this evening, and I applaud all of the fabulous women that talked, because I was shaking my head through the whole thing. I'm really glad I actually wasn't in the front of the room, because you sick of seeing me doing this the whole time. But for me personally, there's two things that drive this. Obviously my business and the fact that I need to be able to find marketable candidates for the clients that I work with. Advocate for my friend Susan, who's one of the good guys in the industry, who does great work and works with a lot of great organizations. Pains me that Susan was the one that brought the Ruby Round Rails person to Annmarie, but that's okay. I didn't know Annmarie at the time, so I'm okay with that. But one of the things that we talked about that I think is really important about Albany Can Code, and it's not just from one set of another, it's about exposure. So I think it was Natalie and someone else who said something along the lines of, well, my mom was a teacher, my grandma was a teacher, actually it was Susan, and then if your father was an attorney or your father was whatever, kids are shaped by what they're exposed to. So if they don't have the exposure and the understanding of all of the capabilities that are out there in this diverse landscape and marketplace that is not just the Capital Region but beyond, we have to do something to fix that. And so Albany Can Code is bringing that. We're breaking down in a way some barriers for girls in middle school and high school to understand that they can apply and they have the aptitude and the ability to do technology. But I think the other thing that's really important is that we are creating pathways for what I consider a non-traditional worker to get into the technology field and really change their life for the better. And we have tons of stories of individuals who've gone through our programs that have already accelerated and have given themselves, in a matter of 12 short weeks, $20,000 pay increases. And frankly, that's not just applicable to that person, that affects all of us. So that's $20,000 more that person has to spend in our community, to support our community, to do things in our community. So Albany Can Code is really hitting every single thing that we all think is very important that's been touched on here this evening. So it's really exciting for me to listen to everybody and know that we are all on the same path and that we all are contributing to that, and that's what Albany Can Code is doing. But one of the things that was really important to me about Albany Can Code, and what's something that Annmarie actually gave me the confidence to be able to do, was I never graduated from college. I went to high school. I graduated from high school. I took a couple of college classes, but at my time in my life, my parents couldn't afford to send me. I wouldn't have known the first thing about even applying for financial aid, and so I went right to work. And for years, that's actually haunted me.
And when I sat down with Annmarie and I shared that with her, the first thing she said to me was, I never would have known that. And so just like she had that light bulb of there's so much hidden aptitude and talent that just needs that pathway, it's also something to be able to say, it's okay if you don't have a college degree, you still have talent and skills and passion, and if we can help focus that and get you just that little bit of skill that you need to get to the next part of your career, well then I want to be a part of it, because I know how that I felt. And you know, imposter syndrome. So, you know, I had that same feeling a lot of times in my life, and I know I worked my ass off, and I know I was doing all the right things, but those little things can make you feel less secure about your ability. And so if we're working with an organization like Albany Can Code, that can just make one person feel a little bit more confident about their ability and a little less scared about technology and computers, and show girls that they have the aptitude, and the stereotypes of boys are the only ones that are good at math, or boys are the only ones that can go into technology, or you have to be a certain smartness level, you know, you're not smart enough to do technology. I feel like all the things that we're doing with this organization are breaking down all of those barriers every single day.
So some of the nuts and bolts of what we're doing. So this picture you see up here is a picture of a class that we led in one of the school districts here in the Capital Region. So the impact that we're having is, I mean, I don't even know quite how it's possible, but so far in 2019, I think we've touched over maybe close to 300 students. That's in like the first 4 months of this year, 300 K-12 students. Stacey, is that the correct number, would you say? Okay, well, that's good. Even higher, even better. Yeah, and so working with the teachers in school districts to train teachers to get them ready for the curriculum standards, because New York State, we're excited about this. They're finally going to say, hey, this is something we should be teaching. So that's awesome, and we're getting ahead of that. And like I mentioned, we already have close to 50 students so far this year. So we're on track to really maybe serve 100 different individuals in the Capital Region and try to build a path for them into the tech sector. And if they're already in the tech sector, then you know, figure out how to get them more higher paying jobs if they're women or, you know, people from different backgrounds that may say, hey, I don't know if I have the confidence. Well, we'll show you how. And Stacey, if you haven't already talked to her, please do, because she will cheer you along every step of the way. And I'm just going to skip through my slides because I know I have a slide coming up about what are the other things that we're doing. So just a few more slides from our class. We have, you know, we teach the technical skills, but we also, you know, have folks come in and talk about the soft skills. We have people that come in and coach with job coaching, resume building, matching people best we can up to employers. We have, this is the other thing I'm super excited about. As an employer in the Capital Region, finding talent is really, really hard, as was already talked about. But like being able to be a resource to employers. Employers are coming to us and saying, who do you have? We have XYZ job. And we're really excited to introduce them to entry-level talent. A lot of times the jobs that they're looking to fill are more mid-level and more senior. But guess what? In the tech sector, it doesn't take too long to become a mid-level person. This wonderful woman that shared, who was on the panel who's I think in her second year or third year. Well, she's already, there she is. She's like, you know, she's on her way to be a senior in, say, a year or two. When I hired one of my first employees at Green Tree, we hired him right out of RPI. He was fantastic. I think he was making like 65, 70 starting salary. A couple years later, he was making 90, and then like a couple years later, he was like 120. I'm like, this is like this is the tech sector salaries. I think it was 4 years out of college at that point. He was really good, and he's worth every penny of that. We just heard about how Amazon was going to bring, I know how disappointing, $125,000 paying jobs. I mean, that's the average wage. So we're really excited to be bringing those opportunities to women. Another example, these are just some examples of various panels that we had. The one in the middle, these two women are expert in QA. So quality assurance, we ran a class called automated web testing. So all kinds of stuff. Front-end web development, JavaScript, Ruby on Rails, automated web testing. We did a SQL class. We're hoping to do another SQL class coming up. If folks in the room have ideas of what we should be teaching, talk to me, because we're always looking at different classes to be teaching. I'll let Miriam talk about this part, because this I know is super passionate, one of her passions.
So one of the things that we started off our agenda on was to talk about what we're doing with Albany Can Code, but also to talk about all of the things that are actually impacting people and their ability to get technology trained. And so we can't just focus on training a group of, you know, entry-level or whatever level individuals to enter the workforce with technology skills if we can't get them into the classroom. And this is definitely part of why I love how Annmarie is such a visionary when it comes to this organization. So it started with, let's get some people, get them the skills, take them out of, a kitchen job or, whatever type of role, and give them the opportunity to, make more money and get there. But the fact of the matter is there's a ton of people, and honestly, it mostly probably impacts women more so, that they have barriers to even get their foot in the door to be able to learn those skills. And that's things like being able to afford a laptop, being able to have the equipment to actually do the job. So how can we put anyone in a classroom if they don't have access to the equipment to actually learn and practice the skills that they're learning in the classroom? And so Albany Can Code has developed a laptop lending program. And so what we do is, and we'll bring it up here too, because I think it's good to let everybody know, we'll take your old laptops. We have a Microsoft expert that volunteers for us. He just joined the board, who will take those dilapidated down older laptops, clean them up, refresh them, and give them to students so that they have the ability to actually practice what they're learning in the classroom. Another thing that's really important that we're trying to build out is transportation. Unfortunately and unfortunately, kind of based on where the regions are and where we're doing the classes, sometimes transportation can be an issue. Taking public transportation could take over an hour for them to get to from wherever they live to wherever the class might be held. And so we're developing programs where employers or anyone can really sponsor transportation needs for an individual who wants to get to the class but just frankly can't afford it. We're also looking into and starting to develop a program where we can assist with and acknowledge the fact that daycare is an issue. And so when we say daycare isn't the right term, it's childcare. And so if we've got a mother who's worked all day and her kid is either in school or maybe not old enough to be on their own, or maybe they're even younger and they're not even in school yet, they may not have the means and or the ability to find childcare for an evening class. And so that's something that we're working right now with organizations to try to build up a program where we're not just addressing their technical needs, we're trying to break down all of the barriers and create bridges so that individuals can step over that bridge, kick all of those things out of the way, and actually truly get into this field, learn the skills, get into the field, and then hopefully pay it forward to someone else down the road.
Yeah. I see Anthony DeBonis standing up over there. He just walked in. I'm like, yes, Anthony's back. So the idea for the laptop lending library, I was part of the, I think it was like the mobile developers group. I went to 1 or 2 meetings in a long time. They had this mobile device lending library. They have it. Is it here? And it was like such a smart idea. They just use that and you can borrow it. Because guess what? Testing on mobile devices can be a big pain because there's so many different kinds of devices. And that's really honestly what was kind of like, I remembered that. I'm like, why don't we just lend out some laptops to folks? And we've been able to do that. I think we have 4 students right now that are using our loaned laptops. And I'm not sure if any of those folks are in the room, and I do say this, and I think it's kind of fun. We don't actually care if they give them back, because we know we're going to get more, and we want them to practice, and then we want them to keep learning. So do check in with us if anybody in the room has a lending library laptop, and we'll we'll say, okay, cool, keep it when you graduate. But I mean, that's the thing. If you want to learn this, you have to practice. And then the other thing I just want to say, some more photos of different folks around the Capital Region, some of which is, this is on the left is our digital literacy workshops. So we do this thing called, it's like a code talk. We call it Mom Up, and we do it with moms. We basically, like within 2 hours, can demystify for anybody like what it means to work in tech and like what all this terminology is, because terminology is pretty scary, was talked about already tonight. Well, if you want one, come see me, we'll do it. We'll tell you when the next one is, because in 2 hours, you're gonna feel like, I got this, no big deal. We're gonna do this.
And I think it's important because if parents don't understand what the jobs are for tomorrow, and moms and dads are not feeling literate enough to even have a conversation with their student, it doesn't make it easier for that student to pursue it. So it's a lot easier for that student to feel like they have support and they know that their parent at least understands the basics, to have a conversation with them, and that will just continue to encourage them to continue to pursue this field. And it's mom up, but it could be dad up, it could be anybody up. But it's really about, again, that exposure for parents and for anyone to continue to encourage that, not only for their students, but perhaps for themselves as well. Because once they go through this, they may realize, oh, this is kind of cool, or this is really interesting. Or you were telling me a story about a woman who started a path in the 80s going to college for computer science, and the culture and the atmosphere and what she was doing, she just had a distaste for it because of what she was experiencing. And then she went through something like this, and she's like, I can do this. I love this stuff. Like, I want to get back into it. So those are all of the little catalysts that we're trying to embed into our community to make it something that we can have a more tech-rich marketplace and economy for everyone.
Yeah, so the first Mom Up workshop we did, we realized that I don't know if folks, I wasn't alive for this, I don't think anybody in this room was, but there was a time when women weren't literate and men were literate and women weren't educated. And there's places in the world where this is still the case. And so this idea that we're seeing and people are telling us is that in the digital literacy is happening again, where women are less literate, where the men and their families are more literate. So we're finding women coming to us and saying in their families, there's like this conversation going on between the kids and the dads, but the moms are kind of left out. And they're saying, well, we don't want to be left out. We want to learn. And so they come and we give these workshops. And mostly we've done it with adults, but going forward, we plan to do workshops with a track for both the kids and the adults together so that the kids can be learning and the moms and dads can be learning. And we have one coming up probably in late May in partnership with Girls Inc. We're gonna have the girls from Girls Inc. going, the kids, the young girls, and then the moms going through the program. So, and we look to schedule these whenever folks wanna do them. This is Jamal Taylor, who's our one of our JavaScript instructors, went through our program, is now our JavaScript instructor, and I would highly recommend anybody taking a class with him because he's one of the most passionate people I've ever met and just loves teaching, much like Jason, I must say. And Cam, we have another wonderful instructor who's not here tonight, but he's just awesome too. And then we have a bunch of other photos that you can just see from various classes. The one other thing I wanted to say was that this is super exciting that I get to stand up here and talk about it, and I know Miriam feels the same way, and I know everybody on our board feels the same way, and I know Stacey feels the same way, that we're really lucky to be able to do this work because it's super fun and super exciting, and it really does feel really awesome to give back. It's one of those nice things about doing service to others. But none of this would happen without just me, without Miriam, our tremendous board chair, without Stacey. The entire Capital Region community is the reason why this organization exists. This was like an idea that turned into, okay, let's all do it. Like, it wasn't like, let's one person do it or let's like a couple people. It was like, we're all gonna do this. Because if the employers were not saying, hey, yeah, I believe in this and I need talent, and I wanna help, we wouldn't be where we are. And we've had so much incredible support. And so one thing I just want to maybe wrap up with, I don't know if we've gone over, maybe we have. We've 3 minutes, okay, yes.
See, I told you,
Okay.
30 minutes was gonna go fast.
Yeah, I know. So we're always looking for instructors, so if anybody has an idea or has an aptitude and wants to teach something, whether it be project management, whether it be user experience design, whether it be SQL or some other database or some other technology, we're always looking. We're always looking for venues to host classes. Right now we partner with community colleges, and we believe that's a great partnership for us. We believe this work belongs with them. It's the charter of the community colleges to teach people in the community, so that's really exciting. But we're always looking for opportunities to give talks and do our Mom Up and various other digital literacy workshops. Organizations that might want to partner with us. If you have folks that you think we might be able to work with, we'd love to hear that. Most importantly, I will say, is mentors in the classroom. When people come in and talk to our students about their work, the students start to not only learn the technology, but they start to understand, oh, this is what it looks like to work in these fields. And breaking down the cultural barriers, it's kind of bigger. It's actually pretty hard to do. It's not an easy thing. I just have to say this. We've had a lot of great conversation tonight, but it's not easy. This is hard. I've been doing this my whole career, and I came in here tonight, I'm like, really? We still have to talk about this? I'm so disappointed. It's awesome we are, but we shouldn't be. I really wish 20 years ago we were. And then the last thing I'll just say was talked about, I just wanted to mention this. When I was in the 3rd grade, so I own a business, right? I own a software company. That's pretty darn cool. I love this work. I love being in this position where I can help bring other people into the tech sector. But I read an article somewhere that said, I think it was like 1984 or 1985, maybe the late 80s. Women could not get a loan to start a business without a male cosigner. Like, that was the end of the 80s. So I'm like, wait, what? When I was in middle school, grammar school, whenever it was, like, Mrs. Minor, my 3rd grade teacher, had no other choice. That's the only work she could have done. Mrs. Minor, my 3rd grade teacher, could have been like an awesome developer. It's super cool to give her, for her to have that opportunity, but even better for like the things that we're developing, right? We don't know where we're going. all of us in this human race. You know, we get all these cool devices we're gonna raffle off. We don't know where this ride is going. We don't know where technology is taking us, and we need women and we need diverse faces at the table. So I'm really proud to be part of this work. I hate to say this, but in some ways, I spend less time in my software company. My husband mostly is running that organization now because I had the opportunity to step more deeply into this work, and I believed I was the right person for the job at the time, and I'm glad I am, because I can't believe we've doubled yet again in another year, and we're finally on the path of really becoming a sustainable nonprofit serving the Capital Region and beyond. I'll wrap it up with this. We have been getting calls from all across the state of New York since the last 6 months, like Buffalo, Rochester, Syracuse, Utica, Kingston, now Long Island. How do we do it too? And we believe we're onto a model. So this work, for people in the Capital Region, this is actually something pretty special. There aren't a lot of organizations like this across the country. There's an awful lot of for-profit boot camps, and I can be quite honest with you and say they have a very different mission. They are definitely serving the employer sector, which is quite cool for employers. And some of them are also, many of them are doing really great work, but it's not the kind of work that we're doing. We're doing something a little different in communities. And I'm really proud of the Capital Region that we're here doing this. I really think we're leading the pack across the country. And I'm excited about the opportunity about how we might serve the rest, other regions in the state. I like to move fast. My board is like, let's just slow down a little, which I appreciate. But anyways, it's a pleasure to be here and with Miriam as our board chair.
So I would just want to wrap up by saying thank you for inviting us to come talk tonight a little bit more about Albany Can Code. I think the conversation this evening, Annmarie and I talked before that, and in a way, the good news is we're still talking about it, and it is still something that we need to address. But I think the even better news is that we have made such amazing strides, and we've made such amazing steps in the Capital Region and beyond. And I think if you don't walk away with anything else, understand that there are people that are really passionate about this work. I mean, I joke all the time with Annmarie that you spend an afternoon with Annmarie or even an hour with her, and you will be her disciple for life because she's so passionate about it. But she's passionate about it not because of anything more than she wants to give back. She thinks there's a lot of people, I agree with her, there's a ton of people that just haven't been given the opportunity or even understand that they don't even know that they have the aptitude to do this type of work. So I'm really proud that we have been able to double our size on literally a shoestring budget. We always need employers to help us with developing curriculum, guide our students in the classroom, maybe consider internships or apprenticeships. But just overall, we always welcome conversations where we can talk to people and listen to their ideas, because if there's a way that we can incorporate that into somehow shaping this community and giving back and offering another way to break down a barrier and create a path, we're all for it. And so obviously our contact information is up there, but I just wanted to thank you everyone for this evening, and thank you for whoever opened the window, because that was props to that. I'm never hot. I am always cold, and I'm a little warm. So thank you for, the last presentation of the evening is usually the hardest because everybody's like, okay, it's time to go. But you were awesome. Does anybody have any questions about Albany Can Code that we can answer before we wrap up? I know we might be, I don't want to take too much time, but just in case there is. If there isn't, that's okay too. Okay. Well, thank you.